2025 is shaping up to be one of the most important years in comic book movie history. We have the MCU, not the juggernaut that it was only 3 years ago, trying to gain its reputation back. And we have the newly formed DCU picking up the pieces from the ashes of the DCEU with James Gunn in charge, trying to get where everyone thought they would be in the first place, challenging the MCU for box office supremacy when it comes to comic book movies. Unfortunately for DC Comics and DC Heroes and the DCEU, that never really happened. And unfortunately for MCU fans, we've had a string of bombs, just a lot of bad movies, outside of Spider-Man, No Way Home, and I would say Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I don't think there's been any quality or any high quality things coming out of the MCU since Endgame. And obviously Endgame set the bar really, really high. It has the highest box office in the history of movies, never to be eclipsed. Perhaps the MCU had nowhere else to go but down, but they are trying to pick up the pieces. We've got Deadpool and Wolverine, and we've also got a Superman movie coming up from James Gunn. Obviously, Deadpool and Wolverine introducing the idea of the X-Men, which were acquired in the Fox deal. There's another team out there called the Fantastic Four that came along with it that has the potential to be another billion-dollar movie franchise. And they're going to war. They're basically going to go head-to-head, releasing in the same month within 2 weeks of each other. The summer of 2025 is going to be big time for superhero movies. On the Marvel end of things, they have the third attempt at a Fantastic Four movie coming out on July 25th. And DC has a reboot of their cinematic universe kicking off with the James Gunn-directed Superman on July 11th. If these were any other two Marvel and DC movies like the ones we've been getting from both companies lately, this wouldn't be such a big deal. However, Marvel urgently needs to integrate the characters they acquired from Fox to spice up the MCU, while DC needs a solid movie to get their new franchise of films off the ground. Fantastic Four and Superman feel like make-or-break movies for both companies. And boy, do they. The Superman movie, written and directed by James Gunn, is an enormous deal. This is the first chance that James Gunn has to tell DC fans, we finally got it right. Not only did we finally get it right, we got Superman right. We got the foundation of the entire franchise done correctly in the very first film, and we're only going to do bigger and better things in the future. You can trust us. This is going to be awesome. For the MCU and Fantastic Four, we've never seen these characters in the MCU. People have been dreaming about the Fantastic Four in the MCU essentially for a decade at this point. They've wanted to see these characters, and they say this is the third try. Technically, this is the fourth try. Obviously, we had Fantastic Four, Fan Four Stick, both from Fox, and then we had the Corman movie, during the 80s, or I think it was actually the 90s, which I don't think actually ever released in theaters or whatever, but this is the fourth time they're making a Fantastic Four movie, and they've never gotten it right. It's shocking that they couldn't get the family dynamics and the team dynamics of the Fantastic Four, the first family of Marvel Comics. They've never gotten this right. It's very important. It's imperative for Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios that they get the Fantastic Four right. But it's probably even more important to James Gunn and Peter Safran and the DCU that they get Superman right. Because if that Superman movie doesn't pop, if it doesn't get the character right, if it doesn't get to the heart of the DC universe and who Clark Kent is and who Superman is, people are going to say, oh, this again, I already checked out of the DCEU. It seems like I don't even need to check into the DCU. So both of these films are very, very important, and I do think it's an enormous mistake to go essentially head-to-head. They need to get at least 4 weeks between these films, but I do like the moxie of Kevin Feige saying, screw that, we'll go up against Superman, and I certainly like the moxie of James Gunn going, you know what, screw that, we'll go up against the first family of Marvel and see what happens, because I have faith that my Superman movie is going to bring the heat, and obviously Kevin Feige and company probably feel the same way about Fantastic Four. So I think it would be smarter to separate them. There is going to be some crossover and all that kind of stuff. But if you're going to go head-to-head, I say do it right. Bring out two of the biggest franchises that are exceptionally important, not only to the future of the MCU, but the DCU. Back in 2013, Zack Snyder tried to light a fire under DC with the release of Man of Steel. While it did well financially and critically, it wasn't a huge crowd pleaser. The DCU quickly transitioned to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which showed that the wheels were beginning to fall off, and the less said about the previous two abysmal Fantastic Four iterations, the better. This new Fantastic Four and Superman need to remove some bad taste from fans' mouths and restore the good names of their respective franchises. And I've certainly talked about this here on the channel plenty. I'm not the biggest fan of Zack Snyder as a writer, as somebody that with his understanding of just like DC characters in the DC universe. He's certainly a very talented cinematographer. He's certainly a talented director. But unfortunately, Zack Snyder really couldn't get you to feel for the characters. It was all about the spectacle that was going on. It was the grandeur of all the action and all that kind of stuff. And he really did miss the mark when it came to the heart of who Superman is, the heart of who Clark Kent is, and all that kind of stuff. It just never really worked out. He is far too cynical to be Superman, the most hopeful hero in the history of superheroes. He is basically as American as apple pie, and he is that bright, shining beacon of hope within the DC Comics universe. And if you don't get that right, it doesn't play off Batman right. If everybody becomes Batman, Batman ain't special. And that's really where the wheels started to come off. Obviously, we got Batman v Superman, which is just a really bad movie. There's a lot of billion-dollar ideas shoved into one movie that never really got fleshed out correctly. They should have done a Batman solo film after that, and then done Superman 2, and then they probably should have gotten to a Justice League movie a little bit later on, and probably shouldn't have even done Batman versus Superman. Although the concept in and of itself is really, really exciting. I remember seeing like the little thing in I Am Legend or whatever. I got really excited about it. I was like, that would be great. It turns out that was not the case under Zack Snyder in the DCEU. Obviously, Zack Snyder didn't last very long. He did a lot of the casting of the DC heroes, and he nailed a lot of them. I still think Ben Affleck was a good Batman. I think Henry Cavill had the potential to be a really good Superman. Gal Gadot, I thought, was a really good Wonder Woman. I think they probably miscast Flash. And a lot of people really did love Jason Momoa as Aquaman, even though he wasn't really playing Arthur Curry. It was kind of an unrecognizable character, but obviously that worked. It made $1 billion. When it comes to the Fantastic Four franchise, you know, the family dynamics are important, but the heart and soul of the Fantastic Four is Ben Grimm. It's the Thing. You know, they had Michael Chiklis in the first one that had a major budget on it, at least. I don't want to go back to that 90s movie, which was basically just a train wreck. I don't even know why they tried to make that one. I think it might have been to keep rights or whatever. But Michael Chiklis was a big deal at the time. He was winning lots of awards with the Shield or whatever. And it probably could have worked or should have worked, but they keep tying Doom to the fucking Fantastic Four, and certainly Doom is tied into the Fantastic Four, but his powers being realized or gaining his powers doesn't really happen with the Fantastic Four. Their origin story is separate from Doom, and then they end up meeting up later, and obviously end up being enormous rivalries and stuff like that, because, you know, Dr. Doom fancies himself, you know, as the smartest man not only in the world, but in the entire universe, and perhaps Reed Richards is actually the smartest man. So they have a good rivalry and all that stuff, but they kept tying them way too closely together. It didn't really make a lot of sense. I watched Fan 4 Stick, and the casting wasn't great. I don't see Miles Teller as fucking Reed Richards. And I thought they had a 45 minutes of a decent movie until they came back from the negative zone or whatever, and then it just completely falls apart. Which is kind of important because in that particular version of the film, that's where they get their powers. The fact that the movie kind of breaks down as soon as they get their powers probably doesn't work for a good superhero movie, but they've got some work to do. We haven't had a good Fantastic Four movie yet. We've had a good Superman movie, but it's been over 40 years at this point. It's been a very, very long time since we had a good Superman movie. There is some reason for optimism, but reality has not been that rosy lately. Marvel's biggest competitor lately has been its own weak movies, which are tarnishing their reputation, and DC has had terrible luck with its actors getting involved in scandals that overshadow its films. But now Marvel is finally doing something fresh by integrating the X-Men, like in Deadpool and Wolverine, and now their take on the Fantastic Four. And DC has the strong reputation of James Gunn behind their new Superman, so both movies look poised to do well, as long as their clash does not divide their audience so much that both movies lose in this fight. Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios and Bob Iger and a lot of people's reputations are definitely going to be on the line with Deadpool and Wolverine. It feels like they put all their eggs in the Deadpool and Wolverine basket. Now, obviously, Deadpool, the very first movie, I thought was great. And I've really liked Hugh Jackman's take on Wolverine, although Doc says he's far too tall. But I've liked him since the very first X-Men movie, and I liked him all the way to Logan, which was supposed to be the last movie with Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. But I think they are probably going to be introducing every idea that they plan on spitting out and doing something with over the next 3 or 4 years into Deadpool and Wolverine. I think they're going to stuff it to the fucking brim and have it overflowing with all the other shit that they want to take off, because they know they have one movie that's actually guaranteed to be successful and people are not going to walk away from. Is that going to work to the detriment of Deadpool and Wolverine, and perhaps even kill the ability for a movie like Fantastic Four to take off. I think that's a real possibility because I do think that Deadpool and Wolverine sucks ass, despite having Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, two people playing two characters that everybody basically universally loves. If they can't bring it home and make these ideas work, it's simply not going to work. And they're probably going to have to scrap a lot of shit and maybe even start over. Might have to just jump to Secret Wars and do the reboot, because if it doesn't work in Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't really see a whole lot of future of the MCU making anywhere close to $1 billion, even on a fucking Avengers film after that. If it does not work, it can make money and not work. See also Man of Steel. As far as James Gunn on Superman, James Gunn has been very, very successful in superhero movies. You can see the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Suicide Squad, not nearly as successful, but there was the pandemic and they'd already done a Suicide Squad movie and you weren't sure if it was a sequel or a reboot, and it kind of ended up being both, kind of a mixture of the two, which was very confusing. He did the Peacekeeper show with John Cena, which I thought was funny. I didn't think it was a great superhero show, and I didn't think it was a great DC show. But if you didn't think about it, it was kind of entertaining. I kind of enjoyed it. But he also did take the absolute piss out of Superman and all the other Justice Leaguers in that show at the very end. You know, there's a couple of scenes at the end where he does that. Is James Gunn the right voice? Does he have what it takes to really get to the heart of Superman? I have major doubts about that because I've never seen him do that in any of his superhero movies or projects. Now, certainly, James Gunn is awesome at character moments. He's awesome at building up a relationship between the audience and that character and making you feel for them. But he likes to joke around a lot. He likes to take the piss out of his heroes. And I don't think that stuff works for Superman. Does he have the ability to hold himself back, to rein himself in and let Superman shine over James Gunn? I have doubts about that, but I hope I am proven 100% wrong. But at this point, the only thing that's going to ruin Superman is probably James Gunn, the director. People are going to be going to that movie. They're going to be hoping the DCU is finally correct. And hopefully, once the word of mouth is good that people like this version of Superman, they show up and it has some longevity to it and ends up being a huge success. If people show up on the first week, because there's going to be a lot of people that don't, they're like, you know what, I've seen the DCU. I don't think I'm buying into this. If they come back and they say, man, he basically just made fun of Superman for 2 hours straight. I couldn't take it. It's just going to die and it's going to bomb. And that will likely be the end of the DCU and James Gunn's 10-year plan, no matter what's in production at this point. I don't think James Gunn is going to get a lot of cracks at DCU. If he doesn't get it right on Superman, he probably doesn't get many more chances if he gets another chance. So a lot of stuff is riding on this one. I think it's ballsy to put them essentially head-to-head and may the best film win. And hopefully, if they're both great, they tie and they both blow up and they both go over $1 billion and everyone's happy and superhero movies and comic book movies are put back on the map and we can go back and be excited about this stuff and geek out some more, rather than being like, why the fuck are they doing that? Which has been the case for a few years now. If you want some more conversations about comic book superhero movies or comic books themselves and all that kind of stuff, geek culture in general, I do want to invite you to come over and check out the Thinking Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. Lots of fun people show up on there. Jim from Weird Science, Doc, Aaron Sparrow, 32 Flavors, and Nick Weiser, obviously yours truly. And we're doing podcasts all week long, all kinds of exclusive content on the Patreon, 3 different tiers. Definitely check them out, see what you want to do, and I hope to see you there very soon.